Anakin Skywalker told you exactly what he was going to do. He told Padmé. He told Obi-Wan. He told Yoda. He told a room full of the most powerful Force sensitives in the galaxy when he was 9 years old. And Yoda looked him in the eye and essentially diagnosed him on the spot. Nobody filed the paperwork. This isn't a sympathetic character study about a good man who fell. It's a prosecutorial case. Scene by scene, film by film, across 3 movies and the better part of a decade, Anakin Skywalker dropped every clue a person can drop before becoming a monster. And the people around him, armed with those clues, made the same choice the audience makes the first time they watch these films. They chose hope over truth. They decided he wouldn't really do it. He did it. He told them he would. And what follows is the evidence. The year is 32 BBY. Qui-Gon Jinn brings a 9-year-old boy before the Jedi High Council on Coruscant and asks them to train him. The council runs their evaluation. Yoda, who has trained Jedi for 800 years, takes one reading of this child's emotional state and delivers what is essentially a clinical prognosis delivered out loud in front of everyone. Fear is the path to the dark side, Yoda tells the room. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. People hear that line as fortune cookie philosophy, the kind of thing Yoda says between breaths. But notice the timing. He doesn't say it in the abstract. He says it immediately after the council has completed their evaluation of Anakin specifically, after Yoda has looked at the boy and said, "I sense much fear in you," after the council has identified 3 separate reasons to hesitate about his training. He is too old, they sense an incredible amount of fear in him, and his thoughts keep returning to his mother. Yoda isn't dispensing general wisdom. He is describing a 9-year-old boy's probable trajectory. The chain he outlines, fear to anger to hate to suffering, is exactly the sequence Anakin Skywalker will walk over the next 13 years. It's all there in the first evaluation. The council sees it, states it, refuses to train him anyway, then caves when Obi-Wan insists and trains him anyway. The warning and its consequences are separated by about 45 minutes of screen time. The actual consequences take 13 years. Either way, Yoda named the path. Nobody blocked the road. The council's specific concern about his mother is worth lingering on. His thoughts lingered on her. Not on adventure, not on the Force, not on the power his midi-chlorian count suggested. On his mother. A 9-year-old boy being taken away from the only person who loves him, into an institution that has already told him it doesn't fully want him, can't stop thinking about the person he's leaving behind. The Jedi response to that information is to note it as a red flag and then send him to train. Shmi Skywalker gives her son the best goodbye she can. "You can't stop change any more than you can stop the suns from setting," she tells him. "Now be brave, and don't look back. Don't look back." He does look back. He looks back for the rest of his life. Not one Jedi present offers him anything in response to what is, by all accounts, an emotionally devastating farewell. The institution gets the boy. The boy's grief gets nothing. Qui-Gon Jinn dies on Naboo at the end of that film, killed by Darth Maul. His death matters structurally more than it does narratively. It means Obi-Wan Kenobi, a newly minted knight, takes on Anakin as an apprentice, not from conviction, but from obligation. He promised Qui-Gon. That's the mentorship foundation for the next decade. A man honoring a deathbed promise to train a child that the entire council had reservations about. The wonder isn't that it went wrong. The wonder is that it took until Episode 3. 10 years pass between Episodes 1 and 2. Anakin grows from 9 to 19. During that decade, the premonitory nightmares begin. Visions of his mother suffering. Not abstract anxiety, specific images. By the time Attack of the Clones opens in 22 BBY, Anakin has been watching his mother die in his sleep for years. He tells Padmé about the nightmares early in the film. He doesn't tell the Jedi Order. He can't, because the Jedi Order has trained him to treat that kind of attachment as a weakness to suppress, rather than a wound to treat. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in the trilogy. Yoda's advice, when Anakin eventually does confide in him in Revenge of the Sith about his nightmares of Padmé is, "Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose." That isn't emotional support. That is the emotional equivalent of telling someone with a broken leg to walk it off. The Jedi didn't give Anakin tools to manage his grief. They gave him a rule against having it. And then they were surprised when the grief didn't disappear. But before the massacre, before the confession, before the film reaches its most damning scenes, there is a picnic on Naboo. Anakin and Padmé are sitting in a field, and the conversation turns to politics. What follows is the most revealing 4 minutes in the entire prequel trilogy, and almost nobody treats it seriously enough. Anakin tells Padmé he doesn't think the system works. She asks how he'd have it work. He says politicians should agree what's in the best interests of all the people and then do it. She calls it a dictatorship. He says, well, if it works. When she pushes back, warning him that under a dictatorship they'd effectively become slaves to whoever is in power, he fires back that democracy hasn't done much to stop slavery either. The conversation accelerates. Padmé asks who should make the politicians agree. Anakin says someone. She asks, "You?" He says, "Of course not me. Of course not me." At the moment he says it, he believes it. Across 3 films, he becomes exactly that person. The man who would eventually march on the Jedi Temple, kneel before Palpatine, and enforce the will of the Empire through fear, is the same man who looked at his future wife and said he would never be the one to impose order. The irony isn't subtle, it's structural. Lucas built it into the script. Padmé's response here is worth understanding precisely because the nobody listened argument is more devastating when it's accurate. She doesn't just nod along. She calls it a dictatorship. She warns him they'd become slaves. She is initially alarmed. But then she redirects. She softens. She sees that he's upset about slavery specifically, about his own history, and she pivots toward compassion rather than maintaining the challenge. She noticed the ideology. She expressed concern. Then she chose the person over the warning. That choice, made in a field on Naboo over a picnic, she will make again, much worse, weeks later. Because within the same film, Anakin returns to Tatooine. His mother has been captured by Tusken Raiders. He finds her in their camp, dying, and she dies in his arms. What happens next is the scene the rest of the trilogy is built on. Anakin kills the entire camp, every man, woman, and child. He returns to the Lars homestead and confesses to Padmé with total clarity. I killed them. I killed them all. They're dead, every single one of them. And not just the men, but the women and the children too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them. He is weeping. He isn't confessing to receive absolution. He is confessing because the weight of it's enormous, and Padmé is the only person he has. She goes to him. She holds him. She does not challenge the confession. She does not report it to the Jedi. She does not report it to the Republic. The Jedi Order never finds out. Obi-Wan doesn't learn until years later, living on Tatooine in exile, and by then, it's ancient history. Padmé's compassion in that moment is human and understandable. She sees a traumatized young man who just watched his mother die. But the structural consequence of her response is catastrophic. Anakin Skywalker commits a mass slaughter and receives comfort. He learns that the person closest to him will absorb the worst of him without alarm. The feedback loop that should have interrupted the pattern doesn't fire. The film even telegraphs this musically. The Darth Vader theme, the Imperial March, plays briefly over the massacre sequence. Lucas wasn't being subtle. He was scoring the scene's meaning directly. This isn't a grief-stricken lapse. This is the first act. The parallel between the Tusken Massacre and the Jedi Temple Massacre in Revenge of the Sith isn't accidental. Same rage, same target category, same willingness to include those who offer no resistance. Anakin in the Tusken camp and Anakin leading the 501st Legion down the Jedi Temple corridor are the same person making the same choice at different scales. The first time, he wept. The second time, he didn't need to. Between episodes 2 and 3, the Clone Wars animated series fills in years of gradual moral erosion that the films skip over. Academic analysis of the series documents that Anakin tortures prisoners in multiple episodes, not in isolated moments of rage, but repeatedly, as a tactical choice. Each instance gets rationalized. It's wartime. The information is needed. The ends justify the means. By the time Revenge of the Sith arrives, Anakin has already built the psychological infrastructure for the argument Palpatine will eventually make explicit. That ruthlessness is efficiency. That power used decisively is power used well. In Season 3 of the Clone Wars, episodes 15 through 17, the Mortis arc, something happens that has no equivalent anywhere else in Star Wars. Anakin is drawn to a mysterious realm called Mortis, where 3 force-wielding entities dwell. The Father, representing balance, the Daughter, representing the light side, and the Son, representing the dark side. The Son turns Anakin briefly to darkness, and then, and this is the detail that recontextualizes everything, the Son shows Anakin a vision of his own future. Anakin Skywalker is shown what he will become. The Father then wipes his memory of the vision to break the Son's hold on him. The man who will become Darth Vader is the one person who receives explicit foreknowledge of his own transformation. He sees it. He is shown the destination, and then the knowledge is taken from him. If the nobody listened thesis has a single most extreme expression, it's this: the one person who had the information most directly couldn't keep it. The Clone Wars final season adds the last major piece of connective tissue before Revenge of the Sith. Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's Padawan, is falsely accused by the Jedi Council of a bombing. They expel her. She is eventually exonerated and offered readmission. She refuses and leaves the order entirely. Anakin watches the institution he has given his life to falsely condemn someone he loves, then extend a half-hearted apology and fail to keep her. He files this. When his own crisis arrives in Revenge of the Sith, he has recent evidence that the Jedi Order will sacrifice those close to him when it's convenient for the institution. Revenge of the Sith opens in 19 BBY, with Anakin already experiencing premonitory visions of Padmé dying in childbirth. He goes to Yoda. He doesn't say Padmé specifically, he can't, because she's a secret, but he describes the nightmares. Yoda's advice is to train himself to let go of everything he fears to lose. This is the same advice the Jedi have been giving him for a decade. It has never worked. Yoda delivers it again. Then 3 things happen in rapid succession that determine the rest of the film. Palpatine appoints Anakin as his personal representative on the Jedi Council. The Council accepts the appointment because they want access to Palpatine's inner circle. Then they deny Anakin the rank of Jedi Master that normally accompanies Council membership. No explanation is given on screen. Mace Windu simply states it. You are on this council, but we don't grant you the rank of Master. Anakin's response is immediate. What? How can you be on the council and not be a Master? This is outrageous. It's unfair. The outburst is petulant. It's also comprehensible. The council has just publicly humiliated him in his first session as a member. They've accepted a position they didn't offer, conferred status they're simultaneously withdrawing, and communicated distrust without explanation. Anakin's reaction confirms every reservation they had about him. His reaction was also caused by exactly the behavior that caused them to have those reservations. The institutional cycle is feeding itself. Then, in the same scene, they ask him to spy on Palpatine. Anakin calls it treason explicitly. The Council wants his disloyalty to the one person in his life who has been consistently loyal to him, in exchange for continued membership in a club that just downgraded his status and treated his public humiliation as a test he failed. Obi-Wan's defense of the decision is 4 words. It's war, Anakin. Palpatine has been cultivating Anakin for the entirety of the prequel trilogy. He tells Anakin he knew him since he was a small boy. He praises his accomplishments when the Council doesn't. He is warm where the Jedi are formal, personal where they are institutional, and consistently present at the moments when Anakin most needs acknowledgement. The grooming is complete before Rots begins. All Palpatine needs to do in Episode 3 is show up at exactly the right moment with exactly the right answer. That moment is the galaxy's opera house. Palpatine tells Anakin a story. He calls it the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. A Sith legend, he says, not a story the Jedi would tell you. The full speech is worth quoting because its precision is extraordinary. Darth Plagueis was a Dark Lord of the Sith, so powerful and so wise he could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life. He had such a knowledge of the dark side that he could even keep the ones he cared about from dying. Anakin asks if he could actually save people from death. Palpatine continues, "The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural." He describes Plagueis' eventual death, killed by his own apprentice in his sleep, and concludes, "Ironic, he could save others from death, but not himself." Anakin asks, "Is it possible to learn this power?" Palpatine, "Not from a Jedi." Notice what Palpatine never does in this scene. He never says, "I can save your wife." He never says, "Come to the dark side." He never even mentions Padmé. He tells a story. Anakin asks the question himself. The architecture of the seduction is that Palpatine doesn't offer a solution. He creates a need, and then positions himself as its only possible answer. The genius of the manipulation is that Anakin reaches for the hook. When Mace Windu goes to arrest Palpatine and tells Anakin to stay behind, explicitly offering to trust him if what he said is true, then walking out the door without him, Anakin follows anyway. He arrives to find Mace standing over Palpatine with his lightsaber. Palpatine's face has been disfigured in the duel. He's pleading. Mace tells Anakin the Chancellor is too dangerous to be left alive. And Anakin hears the exact same logic Palpatine used to justify killing Count Dooku. He's too dangerous to be kept alive. The intervention that follows isn't an ideological conversion. It's a panic decision. Anakin severs Mace Windu's hand. Palpatine kills him. And in the silence that follows, Anakin says out loud what has just happened. "What have I done?" The Matthew Stover novelization of Revenge of the Sith, written with George Lucas's explicit instruction that Anakin's fall must appear to be driven by his own choices rather than external manipulation alone, opens with a framing device that says more about the entire trilogy than almost any single scene. In its first section, the prose reads, "This is how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker, for now." By the novel's third section, after the Jedi Temple massacre, those two words change. "For now" becomes "forever." The entirety of the Star Wars prequel story is the gap between those two words. There was a moment before "forever" arrived. The whole tragedy is about how he got there. George Lucas wasn't making things up when he designed Palpatine's rise to power. He said so explicitly. "All democracies turn into dictatorships, but not by coup," Lucas stated. "The people give their democracy to a dictator, whether it's Julius Caesar or Napoleon or Adolf Hitler." His core question for the entire prequel trilogy was, how did the Republic turn into the Empire? That's paralleled with, how did Anakin turn into Darth Vader? How does a good person go bad, and how does a democracy become a dictatorship? Multiple confirmed sources document that Lucas cited Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte, and Adolf Hitler as the three primary historical models for Palpatine's rise to power. The title, Chancellor, which Palpatine holds before declaring himself emperor, directly echoes Hitler, who held the same title following Nazi electoral victories in 1933. The stormtroopers were named explicitly after the Sturmabteilung, the Nazi SA paramilitary. Lucas developed the original Star Wars concept during the Watergate era, with Richard Nixon as the contemporary model for the corrupted executive. The political mechanism Lucas documents across the prequel trilogy isn't fictional invention. It's historical process. Each individual vote for expanded executive power in the Galactic Senate looks reasonable in context. There's a crisis, there's a war, there's a security argument. None of them appears catastrophic in isolation. Taken together, they are the slow dissolution of democratic governance from within. Padmé watches the Senate vote for Palpatine's rule and says the line that Lucas put there specifically to name what she's watching. So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. Caesar's Rome, Hitler's Weimar Germany, Napoleon's revolutionary France. In every historical case Lucas studied, the democratic institution didn't fall to an outside conqueror. It was dismantled by someone the institution had already admitted, already elevated, already trusted. The monster was always on the inside, wearing the right credentials, using the correct procedural language. Palpatine doesn't seize the Galactic Senate. The Senate hands it to him. And every clue Anakin missed about Palpatine, every warning sign he rationalized, every red flag he chose not to see, mirrors the same willful blindness that real populations have extended to real tyrants throughout recorded history. Lucas was drawing a map of a recurring human failure. The Star Wars galaxy is just where he chose to draw it. The Jedi Order's role in Anakin's fall is the part of the tragedy that the films force you to reckon with, if you're being honest. Because the Jedi saw every warning sign. They sensed his fear during the evaluation when he was 9. They noted his attachment to his mother as a specific concern. They watched him grow into a young man who wore his emotions on the surface and treated suppression as the only alternative to eruption. And their response, consistently, across 13 years, was to give him a rule rather than a relationship. Academic analysis of the prequel trilogy frames this precisely. The Jedi Order encouraged Anakin to let go rather than giving him tools to work through his attachment. The distinction is the difference between a therapist and a drill sergeant. Suppression and regulation aren't the same thing. Telling someone that love is a weakness does not make them stop loving. It makes them hide the love and the fear and the grief. It builds a pressure system with no release valve. When Anakin confides his nightmares about Padmé to Yoda and asks for guidance, Yoda's response isn't, "Tell me more about these visions," or "Let's find you support." It's, "Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose." This is the same answer he has been giving Anakin for 13 years. It's the Jedi Order's only answer to attachment. It never worked once. They kept prescribing it. The Council's decision in Revenge of the Sith to deny Anakin the rank of Master, while simultaneously asking him to commit what he explicitly calls treason, is the institutional failure in concentrated form. They distrust him enough to withhold the rank. They need him enough to demand his most important loyalty. They want the betrayal of his relationship with Palpatine without offering him anything in exchange, except continued membership in an institution that has just publicly humiliated him. And they don't explain any of it. They don't tell Anakin they suspect Palpatine has placed him as a spy for the Chancellor. They don't explain why the rank is being withheld. They give him the assignment and expect him to comply on the basis of loyalty to an institution that has demonstrated it doesn't fully trust him. The analysis from Stover's novelization makes Obi-Wan's private position clear. He defends Anakin to Yoda and Mace, describes his loyalty, says he will stop at nothing to protect the people he loves. Obi-Wan knows this about Anakin. He says it to the Council. None of that knowledge translates into the kind of direct, personal support that might have given Anakin somewhere to bring his worst fears other than Palpatine's office. There is a scene in Revenge of the Sith that encapsulates this institutional failure in a single exchange. Obi-Wan tells Anakin, "Be careful of your friend Palpatine." Anakin asks, "Be careful of what?" Obi-Wan doesn't say he's a Sith Lord. He doesn't say he's dangerous. He says, "He wouldn't say," meaning Palpatine didn't inform the Jedi Council about a private meeting. That is the warning Anakin receives. Not, "We have serious concerns about this man's ambitions." Not, "We believe he is manipulating you." Just, "He didn't call ahead." After 13 years of giving Anakin rules instead of relationships, the Jedi Order's final attempt to pull him back from the edge is a vague suggestion of caution from a man who treats him formally, about a man who has treated him like a son. Palpatine wins because he was the only one willing to answer the question Anakin was actually asking. The march on the Jedi Temple happens the night of Anakin's pledge to Palpatine. He leads the 501st Legion through the doors. Inside are Jedi and Jedi younglings, children training to become the same kind of Jedi that Anakin himself was brought into as a child. What he does in that temple is a direct structural echo of the Tusken camp. Same decision, same category of victim. The first time he did it, he wept and confessed to the woman who loved him. The second time, he didn't weep. He had practiced. The confrontation on Mustafar closes the film's evidence. Padmé arrives and begs him to stop. He doesn't stop. Obi-Wan appears from the ship behind her, and Anakin concludes she has betrayed him. He force chokes her until she loses consciousness. Obi-Wan tries to reach him. Anakin's response to his mentor's presence is, "If you're not with me, then you are my enemy." That line echoes the picnic on Naboo. On Naboo, he was advocating for a system where politicians would be made to agree. On Mustafar, the system is him, and the only two options are agreement or elimination. "Of course not me," he told Padmé years earlier. He was wrong. He was always wrong. He just hadn't yet become the person he was already describing. Obi-Wan answers, "Only a Sith deals in absolutes." He draws his lightsaber. He tells Anakin he was his brother. He loved him. He defeats him and leaves him burning on the banks of a lava river on a planet that looks like the inside of everything Anakin spent his entire adult life afraid of. The armor goes on. The first breath rattles through the mask. And the word in the Stover novelization changes from "for now" to "forever." George Lucas said he loved history because, while the psychological basis of Star Wars is mythological, the political and social bases are historical. He built the prequels as an answer to a real question. How does a good person become a tyrant, and how does a democracy become an empire? His answer, across 6 hours of film and the entire arc of Anakin Skywalker's life, is that it doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in a sequence of smaller moments that nobody stops because each one seems survivable, manageable, understandable. Anakin is afraid of losing his mother. Nobody helps him with that fear. Anakin kills a camp of people and confesses it. Nobody reports it. Anakin tells his future wife he thinks someone should make people agree by force. She challenges him, then lets it go. Anakin is shown his own future as Darth Vader. The memory is taken from him. Anakin watches the Jedi falsely condemn someone he loves. The institution moves on. Anakin is publicly humiliated by the institution he's given his life to, asked to betray his closest relationship, and given no explanation for either. He breaks. None of these moments in isolation looks like the hinge point. Together, they are a complete record. Every person in Anakin Skywalker's life was handed this evidence and chose hope over truth. They decided he wouldn't really do it. He did it. He had been telling them since he was 9 years old. The tragedy of Anakin Skywalker isn't that the dark side is seductive, or that Palpatine is manipulative, or that the prequels have flawed dialogue. The tragedy is that every society that has ever watched a democracy collapse told itself the same thing at every stage. The warning signs were there. The behavior was documented. The escalation was visible. And the people with the information, equipped with the evidence, looked at it and found reasons to believe the next chapter would be different. Yoda named the path in the first evaluation. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. He was right about every step. He was present for the whole journey. He didn't stop it. That's the horror of this story. Not Darth Vader. Darth Vader is the ending. The horror is everything that came before him, that everyone saw and nobody interrupted. Because interruption would have meant admitting what the evidence was already saying. And that isn't a Star Wars problem. That is a human problem. That is the oldest problem there is. Subscribe if you want to keep watching stories like this one.